I never thought I'd be standing here, staring at my phone screen, as the message from Chloe loaded. The words were like ice, settling deep inside me, freezing every part of my body. Can't wait to see you tonight, Luke. I miss you more than you'll ever know. I don't know what hit me first, shock, rage, or the suffocating feeling of betrayal. Chloe and I had been married for 5 years. We had built a life together, 2 kids, a house, plans, dreams. But as I looked at that message, I realized none of it was real. None of it had ever been real. I tried to steady my breathing, but my hands were shaking. I couldn't believe it. The whole time I thought I was being the perfect husband, coming home early from work, fixing things around the house, spending weekends with the kids, and never questioning her. But she had been lying to me for months. Maybe longer. How had I missed it? I grabbed my coat and stormed out of the house, barely noticing the cold night air as I walked to the car. I didn't know where I was going, just away. Away from everything I thought I knew. Away from Chloe, away from Luke, the man who had been in my circle for years. He was a friend of ours, someone I'd trusted, someone I'd had over for dinner countless times, someone I'd watched my kids play with. The thought that he had been sleeping with my wife hit me like a gut punch. The engine roared to life, and I let the wheel guide me down the familiar streets. The only thing that seemed real anymore was the burn in my chest. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to find them by sitting at home, moping. When I got to Luke's place, the lights were on in the window. I had no plan, no words prepared. I just knocked hard and fast, my fist connecting with the door without thinking. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through me, the desire for confrontation pushing everything else aside. I could hear movement on the other side of the door, and then it opened. Luke stood there, wearing a casual button-down shirt, clearly surprised. "Ethan?" he said, eyes narrowing as if trying to place me. Without hesitation, I shoved my way inside, barely waiting for an invitation. "We need to talk," I said, voice low but steady. "What the hell, man? You can't just barge in here." "I know," I spat, "but I just read a message from Chloe. And now I know what you two have been doing behind my back." Luke's face twisted for a moment, something like guilt flickering in his eyes, but it quickly morphed into defensiveness. "I don't know what you think you saw, Ethan, but it's not." "Cut the shit, Luke," I interrupted, my voice rising. "I've known you for years. I trusted you. And you're screwing my wife. For months. Do you even feel bad about it?" He swallowed hard, his posture stiffening. For a brief moment, I thought he might apologize, but instead he just looked away. "I don't know what you want from me. It just happened. We both happened? You both just happened? That's how you explain it." The anger surged in me again. I had seen Chloe with Luke before, seen them talking and laughing like old friends. I never once suspected the line they were crossing together. "Yeah," Luke said, his voice dropping. "It's not like you and Chloe have been, great lately." She wasn't happy, Ethan. The sting of his words hit harder than I expected, but it was the truth, wasn't it? Chloe had seemed distant lately, more irritated than usual, less affectionate. But hearing him say it out loud, hearing him justify what they had done, made it all worse. "You think that gives you the right?" I asked, my voice thick with bitterness. "You think because she was unhappy, you could just do whatever you wanted?" Luke didn't answer, but the silence spoke volumes. The guilt that hung in the air between us felt unbearable. I turned on my heel and left without saying another word. Back at home, I sat in my car, not ready to go inside, not knowing how to face Chloe. She had betrayed me with someone I trusted, someone who I thought was my friend. The pain of it twisted my gut, but what hurt the most was the realization that I wasn't innocent either. I had been too busy, too wrapped up in my own life to see what was happening. Chloe had been looking for something I wasn't giving her, and Luke had been more than willing to step in. I had failed her as a husband. I knew there was no point in confronting her yet. I needed to think, to breathe. But when I finally went inside, she was sitting on the couch, her eyes red, as if she had been waiting for me. She knew. She had been expecting this. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry." I stopped at the door, unable to move. "Sorry?" I asked, disbelief in my voice. "Sorry for what? For betraying me with Luke?" For destroying everything we built. She winced, her hands wringing in her lap. I never meant for it to go this far. I swear. I never wanted to hurt you. Then why did you do it? I shot back, my voice tight with frustration. Why did you let him in? Why didn't you come to me if you were unhappy? Chloe's gaze dropped to the floor, and I could see the tears starting to gather in her eyes. I don't know, she whispered. I felt alone. I felt like you didn't see me anymore. And then Luke he understood me. He made me feel seen. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the pounding in my chest. Her words hit hard, each one like a slap. You were too good at hiding it, Chloe. I didn't know. I didn't know what you needed. And I should have. For a long time, neither of us said anything. The silence in the room was suffocating. I felt the weight of everything we had, everything I thought we had, crushing me. Days passed, and I didn't know what to do with myself. The trust was gone, shattered beyond repair. But then, on one of those nights, as I tried to drown my pain in whiskey, I received a message from Hannah, a woman I'd known for years. She was the sister of one of my childhood friends, someone I had always been friendly with but never crossed any lines. Her message was unexpected. I'm so sorry about what happened, Ethan. If you ever need to talk, I'm here. It was simple, innocent even, but my mind, clouded by anger and betrayal, twisted it into something else. She had always been attractive in her own way, but now, in the wake of everything with Chloe, I found myself staring at her message, feeling something dark stir inside me. Was this revenge? Was this a way to make Chloe feel the pain she had caused me? I didn't think about it for long before I sent her a reply. Maybe we should talk. We met a few days later. At first, it was casual, a simple drink, an innocent conversation about life and everything that had gone wrong. But as the hours passed, the conversation turned more personal, more intimate. Maybe it was the alcohol, maybe it was the hurt inside me, but I let the boundaries slip away. And just like that, I kissed Hannah. For a moment, it felt like I was in control again, like I was taking back something I'd lost. But as we broke apart, I saw the look in her eyes, the same look of vulnerability I had seen in Chloe's eyes months ago. And I knew this wasn't going to fix anything. I left that night, the weight of my actions weighing down on me even more than before. I had betrayed Chloe in a way that was different but still just as damaging. In the end, the pain didn't lead to healing. It just created a cycle of hurt that would never end. What I had done with Hannah, what Chloe had done with Luke, it didn't bring us closer. It only tore us apart even more. What should have been a chance at reconciliation turned into another lie we both carried. Our marriage was dead, but neither of us had the courage to face the truth. And that's how I found myself here, alone with the mess of choices I'd made, knowing I would never get back the life I had thought was perfect. The days after that night with Hannah felt like I was trapped in a fog. I had crossed a line, one that I couldn't take back, and in doing so, I only confirmed the truth I had been avoiding for far too long. My marriage to Chloe was broken beyond repair. There was no coming back from the lies, the betrayal, the trust that had been shredded. When I woke up the next morning, I was still numb. The weight of my actions, the kiss with Hannah, the confrontation with Luke, the knowing silence between Chloe and me, was almost too much to bear. But the numbness quickly gave way to something colder, sharper. A realization that had been sitting inside me for days, waiting to make itself known. I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't live in this house, this life, built on lies and deceit. I couldn't stay with Chloe, couldn't continue pretending like things would ever go back to the way they were. The person I was, the man I had thought I was, no longer existed. I had been living a dream, one that was crumbling piece by piece, and I had been too blind to see it until now. I looked at Chloe across the kitchen table that morning, her face drawn with exhaustion and guilt, as if she were waiting for me to say something, anything, that would give her some kind of hope. But there was nothing to say. No apologies were going to fix this. No explanations could undo what had already been done. Chloe, I said, my voice steady but cold, I can't do this anymore. I'm done. Her eyes widened, the weight of my words sinking in. What do you mean? Ethan, please? I know I screwed up, but we can fix this. We can fix it? I interrupted, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. You think we can just fix this? You think that after everything, we can just start over like nothing happened? I felt the anger rise again, but it wasn't directed at her anymore. It was directed at myself. For staying so long. For not seeing the truth. You slept with Luke, Chloe. You destroyed everything we had, and now you want me to just forgive you? Pretend like nothing matters? Her lips trembled, but she didn't respond. What could she say? There were no words that would take this pain away, no apology that would undo the damage. I had already made up my mind. You broke me, I continued, my voice barely above a whisper. And I don't think I can ever trust you again. I don't even know who you are anymore. She was silent, her eyes brimming with tears, but I couldn't look at her anymore. I couldn't look at the woman who had been my wife, the woman who had shared a life with me and then destroyed it in a matter of months. I'm leaving, I said. The words felt like a relief, like a weight had been lifted from my chest. I wasn't going to wait around anymore, letting this lie eat me alive. I'll figure out the details later, but I'm done. I turned away from her before she could say anything more. I couldn't bear to hear her try to justify her actions anymore. As I grabbed my coat and walked out the door, I felt a rush of freedom that I hadn't felt in months, maybe even years. It wasn't the kind of freedom I had imagined, but it was freedom all the same. The weight of the lies and the betrayal was gone. For the first time in a long while, I could breathe. The days that followed were a blur of phone calls and legal papers. Chloe tried to reach me, tried to apologize, tried to beg for another chance, but I refused to take her calls. I couldn't hear it anymore. I couldn't listen to her plead for my forgiveness when I knew deep down that nothing would ever fix this. The trust was gone. The love I once had for her had been buried under layers of hurt and deception. I found myself holed up in a small apartment, a place I rented to have some space, some peace. It wasn't much, but it was mine. It didn't remind me of the family I'd lost or the life I had abandoned. There was no Chloe here, no kids, no constant tension. Just silence. And in that silence, I began to realize just how much I had ignored over the years. How much I had sacrificed for the sake of a relationship that wasn't real anymore. I'd been so focused on being the perfect husband, the perfect father, that I had neglected myself. I had spent years trying to fix things with Chloe, trying to hold it all together, even as the cracks widened and the pieces fell apart. But now, with everything gone, with no more pretending, I was forced to confront the reality of who I was. I wasn't a victim, no matter how much I wanted to paint myself as one. I had allowed this to happen. I had let Chloe drift away, let the distance grow between us, let the signs of her unhappiness go unnoticed. And in doing so, I had set the stage for her to seek comfort in someone else. The guilt that had eaten at me in the days after I'd kissed Hannah began to fade, replaced by a more sobering truth. What I had done, what Chloe had done, was part of a bigger picture. A picture of two people who had grown too far apart, who had lost sight of each other, and who couldn't find their way back. It was never about revenge. It was never about hurting each other. It was about the fact that we were no longer the people we had once been. But that didn't make it any less painful. The idea of starting over, of rebuilding from the ground up, was terrifying. But it was the only option I had left. I spent the following weeks in a haze, drifting between the chaos of paperwork and legal meetings. The divorce process was long, more complicated than I had anticipated, and there was always the looming fear of what would happen with the kids. Chloe and I had agreed on joint custody, but I could see the strain it put on both of us. The arguments over schedules, the guilt of not being with them every night. It tore at me, but I reminded myself that it was better than living a lie. And then there was Luke. I hadn't spoken to him since that night. I wasn't sure I ever would. It was strange to think that this man, who I had once considered a friend, was now a symbol of everything that had gone wrong in my life. There was no redemption for him in my eyes. I knew he was just as much a part of the destruction as Chloe, but he wasn't the one who had promised to love me forever. I wanted to confront him, to make him understand the depth of the hurt he had caused. But what was the point? What would it change? Chloe had made her choice. He had made his. And I had to make mine. In the end, I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't keep living in the shadow of the lies. I couldn't keep pretending that everything would work out, that we could fix this, that there was some way to undo the damage. There was no going back. There was only forward. And as much as I feared the future, as much as I hated the way everything had turned out, I knew it was time to move on. It was time to start over, not with Chloe, not with Luke, but with myself. The weeks that followed my decision to leave Chloe felt like I was trapped in a constant cycle of emotional turbulence. I had expected relief, but instead, I was met with an overwhelming silence that only made everything harder to bear. At first, there was a strange kind of freedom in the apartment, an absence of tension that I hadn't realized was suffocating me. But the loneliness started to creep in. The house we had built together, the life we'd crafted, kept haunting me. And then, as if the universe knew I was struggling to hold onto any sense of stability, Chloe began reaching out. It started with a simple text, nothing too intense, just a "can we talk?" But even that one message set my nerves on edge. I had spent so much time convincing myself that I was doing the right thing, that walking away was the only way to find peace, but part of me still wanted to believe there was a chance to fix things. I had loved her for years, after all. Despite everything she had done, despite everything I had done, there was a part of me that couldn't let go of the image of the woman I had married. But I knew I had to be strong. I knew this wasn't going to end in some tearful reunion where everything magically fell into place. Chloe's betrayal was too deep. What had started as a small fracture in our relationship had turned into an irreparable chasm, and no amount of apologies or promises could ever bridge it. Still, she persisted. She came over one evening, uninvited, standing on the doorstep of my apartment, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. The wind whipped through her hair, and for a moment, I almost didn't recognize her. She wasn't the woman who had once been so full of life, so confident. She was different now. Vulnerable. Broken. "Ethan," she said, her voice fragile. "Can we please talk?" I didn't answer right away, just stood there, my arms crossed over my chest. The way she said my name, the desperation in her voice, it hit me harder than I expected. I wanted to say something, anything to make the situation easier, to somehow pretend like things could go back to how they were. But I couldn't. Finally, I nodded, stepping aside to let her in. She walked past me, her movements slow, cautious, as if she didn't know how to navigate the space between us anymore. And to be honest, neither did I. We sat down in the small living room, the silence between us deafening. For a moment, it felt like nothing had changed. But everything had. "I've been thinking about what you said," Chloe began, her voice trembling slightly. "And I know I've hurt you. I can't take back what I did. I know I betrayed you, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Ethan." I stared at her, her eyes filled with tears. And for a moment, I almost believed her. The apology sounded sincere. She looked remorseful. But I knew that it wasn't enough. I had heard it all before, too many times. The promises, the apologies, the assurances that things would change. But they never did. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was months of lies, of secrecy, of breaking a trust that had taken years to build. "I don't think you understand, Chloe," I said, my voice low, steady. "It's not just about the affair anymore. It's everything. The way you shut me out, the way you let me live in this false reality while you were with him. You're sorry now, but you weren't sorry when you were in bed with him, were you?" Her face crumpled and she let out a sob. "I never meant for it to happen like that. It wasn't about Luke. It was about us. We were so distant, so disconnected. I needed someone to see me, to make me feel wanted again. And I messed up. I don't care why it happened," I interrupted. "It happened. You did it. And I'm done trying to justify it or pretend it was some mistake. It's over, Chloe." She looked at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You're really done with me? After everything? After our kids? After the years we spent together?" I felt the weight of those words, the guilt creeping in. The kids. Our children. They were the only thing that kept me tethered to the past, to the idea that maybe, just maybe, we could make this work. But I knew that if I let Chloe back in, if I allowed myself to be dragged back into the same toxic cycle, I would be doing them no favors. They deserved better than two parents who couldn't even look at each other without resentment. I'm done, I repeated more firmly this time. This is the end. We're not going to fix this, Chloe. There's nothing left to fix. She stood up abruptly, her hands shaking. So, that's it? You're just going to walk away? You're going to leave me here, alone, to pick up the pieces of this mess? I'm not walking away from you, Chloe, I said, standing as well. I'm walking away from this. From the lies. From the guilt. From the idea that we can just keep pretending. I'm done living like this. She opened her mouth to argue, but I stopped her, holding up my hand. There's no point, Chloe. You're not going to convince me otherwise. I've thought about it too long, too hard. And I'm sure now. I need to let go. I need to move on. For a moment, she just stood there, her face pale, the weight of everything between us crashing down. Then, as if the realization finally hit her, she seemed to collapse inward. Her shoulders trembled, and she let out a strangled sob, one that tore at my chest. I'm sorry, Ethan, she whispered again, her voice barely audible. I never meant for any of this to happen. But it had happened. And nothing would change that. Not her apologies. Not her tears. Not her pleading. I took a deep breath, my heart heavy but resolute. I know you're sorry, but I need to let go. I need to move on from you, from everything. She stared at me for a long moment, as if trying to see if there was any flicker of hope left. But there wasn't. The part of me that had clung to the idea of us, to the hope that maybe we could fix things, had died long ago. And now I was free to start the painful, necessary process of truly letting go. Chloe looked at me one last time, as if searching for something in my eyes, some sign that I might change my mind. But I couldn't give her that. I couldn't give myself that. I'll go, she said quietly, her voice broken. I'll go, but please just know I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Ethan. I nodded, feeling the tightness in my chest as she walked out the door. As she left, I felt the last remnants of the life we had shared slip away, and with it, any illusion that things could have been different. It wasn't easy. It would never be easy. But in that moment, I knew it was the right decision. For both of us. Chloe had to find her own way, and I had to find mine. And for the first time in months, I felt the weight of her presence lift from my shoulders, giving me space to breathe, to heal, and to finally move forward. The legal battle was something I hadn't been prepared for. When I made the decision to end my marriage, I thought it would be difficult. Yes. I knew it would hurt. But I never imagined it would turn into this drawn-out, grueling fight over money, property, and everything we had built together. The moment I filed for divorce, it felt like a switch had been flipped. It wasn't just the end of a relationship anymore. It was war. Chloe didn't take it well. She had been devastated when I left, but the moment the lawyers got involved, her tone shifted. She wasn't the woman who had cried on my doorstep anymore. Now, she was angry, defensive, and determined to get what she believed was rightfully hers. And I couldn't blame her entirely. We'd built a life together, 2 houses, a decent savings, investments, everything we had worked for over the years. But now, it felt like every piece of it was being pulled apart. The first meeting with our lawyers set the stage for what would come. Chloe's lawyer, a woman with sharp features and an even sharper tongue, was aggressive from the start. She'd made it clear that Chloe wanted the house, the kids, and a sizable portion of our shared assets. I couldn't blame her for wanting the kids. Of course, they'd stay with her most of the time, but the rest? It felt like she was taking advantage of the situation. She was angry, and it showed. But I wasn't just going to roll over. The house, the finances, they weren't just hers. I had built everything with her, I had sacrificed, and I wasn't about to let her take everything without a fight. The property wasn't just bricks and mortar, it held memories, both good and bad. I wasn't willing to walk away from it all so easily. I fought for custody, though I knew deep down that it wasn't going to be easy. Chloe was a mother, and she was a good one, better than me in some ways. But I wasn't going to let her paint me as the absent, negligent father. The truth was that I was there for our kids, for all the birthday parties, the school events, the late-night talks. I wasn't perfect, but I was a father who loved his children. And I wasn't about to let her take that away from me. The legal process became grueling. Every meeting, every exchange of emails and phone calls felt like another blow. There were threats, posturing, and accusations from Chloe's side. She claimed I was withholding money, trying to manipulate the situation to my advantage. I pushed back, accusing her of the same. The lawyers fed the fire, encouraging us to go for the throat. It felt like we were in two different worlds now. She was trying to protect herself, and I was trying to protect whatever dignity I had left. There were moments where I almost cracked, where I thought about giving up, just signing the papers and walking away from it all. But then I remembered why I was doing this. I wasn't fighting for the money, I wasn't fighting for the house. I was fighting for something more important. I was fighting for my children. For the right to be a part of their lives, to be their father in a way that I couldn't afford to let go of. Chloe's lawyer played dirty, dragging out the process for as long as possible. Every time I thought we were close to a settlement, she threw another curveball. I could see the toll it was taking on Chloe too. She looked exhausted in every meeting, as if the weight of everything was finally catching up with her. But then, there were moments where she would look at me across the table, a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes, and I could see the old Chloe, the woman I had once loved. She was buried deep beneath the anger and the bitterness, but she was still there. But the longer this dragged on, the more I realized that we had both changed. The version of Chloe I had known, the one who had once been my partner, my confidant, was slipping away. And I wasn't sure that either of us would ever be able to get back to that place. The tension between us was palpable. Every legal exchange felt like a knife to the heart, every argument just another reminder that we had failed. What had once been a life filled with love and possibilities now felt like a game of who could outlast the other. The stakes were high, and the longer the process went on, the more I began to wonder if it was worth it. Was this battle worth the cost? I kept telling myself it was, that I couldn't let go of my kids, that I couldn't let Chloe walk away with everything. But the truth was, the further I got into this mess, the more I just wanted it to end. The more I wanted peace. But Chloe wasn't ready to give up either. And the fight, our fight, seemed endless. In the end, it wasn't about what we had left or what we were fighting for. It was about what we had lost. Our marriage was gone, our trust shattered, and everything we had built together was now something to be divided. And as we sat across from each other in those sterile, emotionless rooms, I realized that there was nothing left to salvage. The process wasn't over, not yet. But I knew that no matter what the outcome was, no matter how the legal battles played out, it wouldn't change the fact that I was no longer the man I had been before all of this. I had been broken, reshaped by the lies, the betrayal, and the constant legal push and pull. I couldn't go back. The truth was that we were both fighting for the wrong things. And I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep going. The days blurred together in the aftermath of the legal battle. The constant tension, the sleepless nights, and the never-ending feeling of being caught between two worlds, my old life and whatever this new one was, had taken its toll. The weight of the divorce, the betrayal, the accusations, it all sat on my chest like a boulder I could never move. But in the midst of it, something shifted inside me. Something that pushed me to move, to start pulling myself back from the brink. I began working out again. It had been years since I'd taken any real time for myself. In the rush of marriage, kids, and trying to hold everything together, I'd let my physical health slip. My body had become a reminder of my neglect, not just of myself, but of the life I had been living. So, I threw myself into the gym, as if the physical strain would somehow clear my mind, give me a break from the constant internal noise. At first, it was painful. Every weight felt heavier than it should have, every stretch was a reminder of how much I had let myself go. But something about the sweat, the burn, the exhaustion, it felt like it was breaking through the layers of numbness I had built up over the years. With every set, with every mile I ran on the treadmill, I felt a little more like myself. Not the man who had been betrayed or the man who had failed, but the man I used to be, strong, determined, whole. It wasn't just the gym. I started to pick up my old hobbies again, things I hadn't done since before Chloe and I had built our life together. I picked up my guitar after months of it collecting dust in the corner of my living room. I found myself sketching again, something I used to do when I was younger, before the world got so complicated. The simple act of drawing, of creating something from nothing, brought me a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. At first, it felt like I was grasping at fragments of a past that no longer fit with who I was now, but over time, those fragments began to stitch together into something new. It was slow, agonizingly slow, but it was something. I was healing even if I didn't realize it at first. The more I focused on myself, the less I thought about Chloe. And it wasn't that I didn't still care about her, but it became clear that I couldn't keep living for the version of her I had built in my head. I had to stop mourning the woman I thought she was, the woman I had lost, and start accepting the truth. She was never going to be who I needed her to be. And maybe, in some twisted way, I wasn't who she needed either. It was hard, but as the weeks passed, I could feel the fog lifting. The resentment, the anger, all of it started to fade. It didn't vanish overnight, but it didn't have to. I was finally letting go of the need for closure, for answers, for justice. There would never be a perfect ending to this story. No apology from Chloe or Luke, no grand gesture, no moment of reconciliation that would make it all better. But peace, real peace, was something I could work toward. I started spending more time with my kids, not out of obligation but because I wanted to. I was becoming a better father, not just because I was their father, but because I was learning how to be present. I was healing in ways I hadn't realized I needed to. They were the reason I kept going, the reason I had to move forward, but now, I was learning how to show up for them in a way that felt right. Not out of guilt, but out of love. And in those moments, when I'd sit with them, watching them play or laughing at some silly thing they said, I began to realize that life wasn't just about the past. It wasn't about holding on to what I'd lost or trying to punish myself for everything that had gone wrong. It was about moving forward, one step at a time. I started to appreciate the small things, the quiet moments, the way the sunlight filtered through my apartment window in the morning, the feeling of strength returning to my body, the joy in my kids' laughter. These things mattered more now. They were the building blocks of my new life. The life that was still unfolding. The emotional distance from Chloe grew. She called, texted, sent messages, but I didn't respond the way I used to. I didn't feel that same pull toward her. I didn't need closure from her anymore. I had come to understand that there was no closure to be had. We had both made choices and we had to live with them. I still thought about her, of course. She was the mother of my children, and I would always care about her in some way. But I was no longer clinging to the idea of a perfect family, a perfect marriage, because that was never what we had. We had been two people doing our best, but somewhere along the way, we lost ourselves and each other. Now, I was learning how to find myself again. And the truth was, I was okay with it. For the first time in a long time, I was starting to feel like myself again, like I had a future that was mine. I wasn't the man I had been before, broken and desperate, but I was becoming someone new. Someone who could heal. Someone who could let go of the past and embrace the possibility of something better. I wasn't there yet. I didn't have all the answers. But I was on the path. And that was enough for now.